The city outside hums softly, cars passing, lights flickering behind distant windows. But inside your room, there's only quiet. No music, no conversation, just the steady rhythm of your own breathing. Most people would call this loneliness, but for you, it feels like peace. It feels like coming home. Have you ever felt misunderstood because you enjoy being alone? I have. For a long time I thought there was something wrong with me, that maybe my comfort in silence meant I was disconnected, different, or broken. But the more time I spent alone, the more I realized solitude isn't emptiness. It's awareness. There's a quiet group of people, maybe you're one of them, who find strength in stillness. They don't fear silence, they understand it, and psychology shows they're not lonely at all. They are some of the most emotionally intelligent and self-aware people you'll ever meet. In a world that worships noise and connection, solitude can seem suspicious, even sad. But science tells another story. When we choose to be alone, something powerful happens in the brain. We shift from external attention to self-reflection, the mental space where we process emotions, organize memories, and rediscover who we are beneath the noise. Neuroscientists call this the activation of the default mode network, the system that lights up when we rest, imagine, and reflect. It's not withdrawal, it's integration. Dr. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who studied the psychology of flow, once said, "Only when a person is able to be alone comfortably can they truly engage in the highest forms of creativity and consciousness." Solitude, then, isn't isolation, it's depth. It's the space where thoughts take shape, where healing begins, and where we learn to breathe again. So maybe, the next time someone calls us quiet or distant, we can smile, because we know something they don't. Silence isn't a void, it's a language. And people who speak it fluently aren't hiding from life, they're listening to it more deeply than anyone else. When we talk about people who genuinely enjoy being alone, we often mistake their quiet for loneliness, as if choosing silence means rejecting connection. But solitude, in its true sense, is not absence, it's awareness. To like being alone doesn't mean turning away from the world. It means feeling at home within yourself. Psychologists call this autonomous solitude time, spent alone by choice, not out of isolation. A 2019 study in the Journal of Positive Psychology found that people who intentionally seek solitude report higher emotional stability, creativity, and self-understanding. They aren't avoiding others, they're recharging through reflection. Dr. Kenneth Rubin described this state as constructive aloneness, when being by yourself becomes a source of growth rather than emptiness. But the difference between solitude and loneliness lies in intention. Loneliness says no one is here for me. Solitude says I am here for myself. People who enjoy solitude often have a strong sense of self-regulation, the ability to manage their emotions without needing external validation. Neuroscientists at the University of Rochester discovered that solitude activates the parasympathetic nervous system, lowering stress and restoring calm. The body, in stillness, learns to feel safe again. This comfort with silence also reflects deeper meta-awareness, noticing one's thoughts rather than being consumed by them. A 2020 study from the University of Essex found that solitude strengthens reflection and emotional clarity, helping people understand their feelings and align with their true values. In this way, solitude becomes an act of integration, not a retreat from life, but a return to oneself. Dr. Esther Buchholz once wrote, "Without solitude, we cannot construct our sense of self." For people who love being alone, stillness becomes a mirror where thoughts, emotions, and memories finally find order. It's not a wall between them and the world. It's the space where they prepare to meet it more honestly. So, the psychology of people who like to be alone isn't about detachment. It's about balance, emotional independence, and inner clarity. They don't escape life, they pause to understand it. And in that quiet pause, they find something many overlook: peace that doesn't need an audience. There was a time when I used to question why silence felt safer than conversation, why I could spend hours alone and still feel full, not lonely, just calm. For a while, I thought something in me was broken, but I've come to understand that my love for solitude didn't appear out of nowhere. It has roots deep, psychological ones. Many of us who enjoy being alone didn't choose it because we dislike people. We chose it because our minds learned early that peace lives in quiet spaces. Some of us grew up in homes where emotions were unpredictable, where love felt conditional, or conflict filled the air. In places like that, silence becomes a sanctuary. Psychologists call this self-regulation, the body's way of finding calm after overstimulation. When the world feels too loud, solitude becomes the nervous system's way of saying, "Let me breathe." And the science agrees. Research published in Frontiers in Psychology found that solitude helps regulate the amygdala, the part of the brain that triggers stress and anxiety. Time alone allows that system to reset, reducing emotional reactivity and improving clarity. That explains why I think more clearly when I'm by myself, why small problems stop feeling like storms once the world grows quiet. But solitude isn't only about safety. It's also about restoration. When I spend time alone, I notice how my thoughts begin to settle, like dust finding its place after being stirred. In that stillness, I can hear myself again. Psychologists call this interoceptive awareness, the ability to sense one's inner state. It's what allows me to recognize I'm tired, or I'm peaceful, or I need space. Over time, this awareness becomes a form of emotional maturity, knowing what I feel before it controls me. Dr. Esther Buchholz, who spent years studying solitude, once wrote, "Without solitude, we cannot construct our sense of self." I didn't understand that at first, but now I do. When we're constantly surrounded by noise, opinions, expectations, conversations, it's easy to lose track of what truly belongs to us. Solitude becomes a kind of mirror, reflecting back who we are without interference. That's why, for many of us, being alone isn't a reaction, it's a choice. We choose solitude the way others choose conversation, not because we're avoiding connection, but because we value it. Solitude gives us space to return to the world more grounded, more honest, more whole. It's not withdrawal, it's renewal. A 2017 study from the University of Buffalo found that people who are comfortable with solitude tend to show higher levels of emotional stability, autonomy, and creativity. They don't rely on constant interaction to feel complete. Instead, they build inner strength that sustains them. That insight reveals something important. Solitude isn't an escape from life, it's an act of self-trust. And maybe that's what's so often misunderstood. Choosing to be alone doesn't mean we've closed the door on others. It means we've learnt that peace doesn't always come from presence. Sometimes it comes from pause. Solitude isn't the absence of love or connection. It's the space where both begin quietly from within. The more we spend time alone, the clearer it becomes that solitude doesn't separate us. It connects us more deeply to ourselves. People who enjoy being alone aren't avoiding life. They're learning to understand it from the inside out. In psychology, this is called high self-regulation, the ability to find calm and clarity without depending on external validation. Dr. Richard Davidson at the University of Wisconsin-Madison found that people who regularly embrace solitude show stronger activity in the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for emotional regulation and reflection. In other words, solitude trains the mind to stay steady even when life feels uncertain. When we're alone, our brain shifts into a different mode, one focused on reflection and integration. Neuroscientists at Yale call it the default mode network, DMN, the part of the brain that activates when we rest, daydream, or think deeply about ourselves. Studies show that solitude strengthens this network, helping us organize thoughts and emotions that often get buried under noise. That's why the quiet doesn't feel empty. It feels alive. Our minds aren't shutting down, they're reorganizing, processing, and creating meaning. Solitude also deepens self-awareness. Without constant distraction, we begin to notice our emotional rhythms, what drains us, what restores us, what we truly value. Psychologists refer to this as meta-awareness, the ability to observe thoughts without being consumed by them. Over time, that awareness builds authenticity. We stop performing and start understanding. We make choices that align with who we are, not who we think we should be. A 2017 study from the University of Buffalo found that people comfortable with solitude tend to make more autonomous decisions and set healthier boundaries. They aren't detached. They're emotionally self-sufficient. This independence comes from what psychologists called an internal locus of control, the belief that peace comes from within, not from the approval of others. And interestingly, solitude can make us more empathetic, not less. A 2018 study in Personality and Social Psychology Bulletin revealed that people who regularly practice solitude show higher empathic accuracy. They understand others' emotions more clearly because they've learned to understand their own. When we sit quietly with our feelings, we learn to recognize that same humanity in others. So perhaps people who like to be alone aren't running from connection at all. They're preparing for it, grounding themselves so they can meet the world with gentleness instead of exhaustion. In the end, solitude doesn't silence us, it refines us. It teaches us that peace doesn't always come from presence. Sometimes it comes from pause. Those who love solitude aren't detached from life. They're deeply attuned to it, because in stillness we don't escape the world, we understand it. When we're alone, something gentle happens. The noise fades, our breath slows, and balance quietly returns. For a long time, I thought that peace was only emotional, but science shows it's also biological. When we step away from the constant noise of life, the brain and body shift into a restorative state, one designed to heal, reflect, and restore clarity. Neuroscientists call it the default mode network, DMN, the system that activates when we rest or reflect. Instead of going idle, the brain turns inward, connecting emotions, memories, and ideas that help us make sense of ourselves. A Yale University study found that solitude strengthens this network, enhancing emotional clarity and creativity. That's why moments of silence often bring insights. The brain isn't shutting down, it's reorganizing. Our bodies respond just as profoundly. Research from the University of Rochester shows that solitude activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the body's built-in recovery mode. Heart rate slows, cortisol drops, and the body signals, "You're safe now." It's a biological reset, the same calm our systems feel during meditation or deep rest. Solitude, in that sense, it's regulation. Dr. Richard Davidson at the University of Wisconsin-Madison discovered that solitude strengthens the prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain that governs emotional control and decision-making. That may be why quiet time helps us respond instead of react. Over time, this strengthens what psychologists call intrinsic regulation, the ability to restore balance from within rather than chasing it through distraction or approval. Psychologists have found that people who regularly spend reflective time alone tend to show lower stress levels, greater creativity, and higher resilience. A 2018 study in Frontiers in Psychology revealed that solitude improves cognitive flexibility, our ability to shift perspective and think more clearly. It's as if quiet moments give the mind space to reset its emotional compass. Even creativity thrives here. Dr. Miyai Csikszentmihalyi, who studied the flow state, wrote that true creativity emerges when the mind is both calm and engaged, a state that solitude naturally supports. In silence, alpha brainwaves rise, imagination awakens, and ideas flow effortlessly. So maybe people like us, those who find comfort in quiet, aren't withdrawing from the world at all. We're recalibrating, letting the brain and body return to their natural rhythm. Solitude isn't avoidance, it's alignment. It's how the mind organizes, the heart heals, and the self comes home. Sometimes solitude begins as a form of escape, a way to breathe when the world feels too heavy, too loud, too demanding. But for those who truly find peace in being alone, something deeper happens with time. The silence that once felt like withdrawal begins to feel like restoration. It's not about running from the world, it's about returning to yourself. Psychology calls this process emotional regulation through self-reflection, the ability to face emotions safely rather than avoiding them. At first, being alone can feel uncomfortable. The quiet amplifies what we usually drown out: the doubts, the regrets, the things left unsaid. Yet it's in that discomfort that something honest begins to unfold. According to a 2019 Harvard study, moments of intentional silence activate the insula, a part of the brain tied to emotional awareness and empathy. In simple terms, solitude doesn't numb us, it sharpens our understanding of how we feel. It helps us hear our emotions, not as noise, but as signals guiding us toward balance. People who like to be alone often develop this awareness naturally. They learn that silence can be a mirror, reflecting back the parts of themselves that need attention, compassion, or forgiveness. In solitude, emotions stop being chaotic, they start to communicate. Anxiety becomes a call for rest. Sadness reminds us what we value. Even anger reveals where boundaries have been crossed. This emotional clarity, psychologists explain, is a sign of high self-regulation, the ability to stay calm and centered without depending on external reassurance. The more we lean into solitude, the more it transforms from avoidance into connection, not with others, but with ourselves. Carl Rogers once said, "When I accept myself just as I am, then I can change." That acceptance is exactly what solitude teaches. It gives us permission to stop performing and simply be. Neuroscience supports this too. When we rest and reflect, the brain's default mode network activates, helping us process experiences, integrate emotions, and form a stronger sense of identity. In this way, solitude becomes an active form of healing, not a pause from life, but a quiet recalibration. It allows us to process the emotional noise that constant social interaction often buries. For people who enjoy being alone, stillness isn't a lack of connection, it's a different kind of connection, one that starts inward before it reaches outward. And over time, the relationship with solitude matures. What once felt like loneliness becomes grounding. The quiet isn't empty, it's full of thought, emotion, and gentle understanding. As we stop running from ourselves, we begin to listen more deeply. Healing, it turns out, doesn't always shout. Sometimes it arrives as a whisper, the kind that says, "You are safe now, you can rest." And that's the quiet truth behind people who like to be alone. They aren't detached from the world. They've simply learned that peace begins within, that solitude isn't separation, but the space where the self finally feels seen. Sometimes we believe solitude can fix everything, that if we stay quiet long enough, the noise inside will fade. But even healing has a shadow. Too much silence can turn into isolation. What once felt like peace can harden into distance. Psychologists call this pseudo-solitude, when being alone shifts from restoration to avoidance. We tell ourselves we're protecting our peace, but often we're protecting our pain. A 2021 study from the University of California, Berkeley, found that long-term isolation activates the same brain region as physical pain. It explains why the longer we withdraw, the heavier life feels. Mornings dull, small joys fade. Solitude can heal, but only when it stays connected to life. True solitude is active. It restores balance and awareness. Isolation numbs. Psychologist Dr. John Cacioppo called it a self-reinforcing loop. The more we pull away, the harder it becomes to return. Many of us have felt that, how silence, once comforting, can slowly become a cage. That's why mindful solitude matters. It's the practice of checking in. Am I recharging or am I hiding? Solitude isn't meant to protect us from truth, but to prepare us for it. Healing, after all, needs both quiet and connection. Studies show that the same oxytocin system that soothes us in love also activates through self-compassion. Even alone, we can feel connected if we meet ourselves with kindness. Because solitude teaches who we are, but connection reminds us why it matters. The goal isn't to build walls, it's to find doors, ways back to the world that feel calm, honest, and real. The more we sit with solitude, the more we begin to see it isn't a retreat from life, but a return to it. Healing doesn't always come from doing more. Sometimes it comes from being still long enough to face what we've been running from. In those quiet spaces, we stop chasing peace outside and start discovering it within. Psychologists call this existential integration, when our inner world finally aligns with the way we live. A 2020 study in the Journal of Humanistic Psychology found that reflective solitude strengthens both purpose and emotional balance. Many of us have felt this. Life doesn't suddenly become easier, but it starts to make more sense. We stop fighting ourselves. Silence also teaches self-compassion. In the stillness, we notice how harsh our inner voice can be, and we learn to soften it. Research by Dr. Kristen Neff shows that people who practice self-compassion recover faster from stress and build deeper resilience. When we stop demanding perfection, we begin to heal in quieter, more sustainable ways. Over time, solitude becomes less of a refuge and more of a teacher. It doesn't erase pain, it transforms it into understanding. Each quiet morning becomes proof that meaning isn't something to be found, but something we create by showing up fully. As Viktor Frankl wrote, those who have a why to live can bear almost any how. Perhaps that why is what solitude helps us rediscover. The part of ourselves that remains steady even when life isn't. So when the world feels heavy, maybe the answer isn't escape, but remembrance. Solitude reminds us that healing isn't about becoming someone new. It's about coming home to the self that's been waiting patiently in the quiet all along. Maybe you've been called distant, quiet, or hard to read. I have too. For a long time, I thought something was wrong with me, that maybe I wasn't meant for a world that never stops talking. But solitude showed me otherwise. It taught me that being alone isn't about escaping life. It's about returning to it, more grounded, more aware. Psychologist Dr. Esther Buchholz once wrote, "Without solitude, we cannot sustain our capacity for connection." I've found that to be true. Time alone doesn't make me love people less. It helps me love them more. Honestly. Because when I find peace within myself, I stop asking others to fill my emptiness. I can finally meet them with presence not need. Science explains this too. Research from the University of Rochester found that solitude increases alpha brainwaves patterns linked to calm, focus, and creativity. That's why, after moments of quiet, my thoughts feel clearer and my heart steadier. Solitude, I've learnt, is not absence, it's restoration. Over time, I stopped seeing silence as loneliness and started seeing it as strength. Carl Jung once said, "In solitude, the mind gains strength and learns to lean upon itself." That's exactly what I found. Solitude doesn't make me distant, it makes me real. So if you've ever felt misunderstood for needing time alone, remember this: solitude isn't where you lose yourself. It's where you finally find yourself again. That's the quiet gift of solitude. It brings you home. In the end, solitude isn't about walking away from the world. It's about returning to it with a steadier heart. In the quiet, we rediscover what truly matters: peace, clarity, and the courage to just be. So maybe the next time life gets too loud, give yourself permission to pause. Sit with the silence, listen to what it's trying to tell you, because sometimes that's where healing begins. If this message speaks to you, stay with us. Follow this channel for more reflections, more stories, more reminders that even in silence, there is a voice worth hearing.
Have you noticed how often you say yes, even when your heart screams no? The word slips from your lips before you even have the chance to think. You smile, you nod, you agree. On the outside, it looks harmless, polite, agreeable, kind. But inside, it feels like a quiet betrayal, a fracture you carry in silence. Each yes becomes a brick in an invisible wall, a prison built not by others, but by your own desperate need to be accepted. Imagine yourself standing in a crowded room, laughter and voices weaving together like a symphony. People turn to you with gratitude. "You're amazing," they say. "You're always there for everyone." They don't see the heaviness pressing down on your chest, the way your jaw aches from smiling, the exhaustion pooling in your bones. To them, you are the dependable one, the giver, the person who makes life easier. To you, you are the person slowly disappearing, piece by piece, under the weight of your own compliance. Think back to the last time you wanted to refuse but couldn't. Maybe it was a friend asking for a favor when your own world was already on fire. Maybe it was your partner, your boss, your family, each tugging at the threads of your energy. You said yes, because the thought of letting them down filled you with dread. Neuroscience calls this rejection sensitivity, a hyperactivation of the amygdala when you sense disapproval. Your nervous system fires as if you're in danger, because, to the pleaser self, conflict feels like annihilation. The brain is wired to crave belonging, and so your no dies on your tongue before it's even born. And yet, every unspoken no has a cost. It seeps into your body like poison, showing up as tension, headaches, shallow sleep, the quiet rage you never allow yourself to name. You become the garden that always blooms for others, while your own roots wither in thirst. You are the candle burning endlessly for everyone else, forgetting that the wax is your own flesh. People call you kind, but beneath the praise is the terrifying truth. They love you for the very thing that erases you. Here lies the paradox, the haunting thesis of the pleaser self. What if the very thing that makes you loved is also the thing that makes you invisible? If your yes is not truly yours, then what kind of love does it bring? The mask wins you applause, but who is clapping when you finally take it off? The question lingers, heavy and unyielding, opening the door to a deeper journey to trace where this prison began and why so many of us are trapped inside it. Have you ever wondered when it first began, that reflex to shrink yourself, to bend, to soften your edges so others might keep you close? It rarely starts in adulthood. The pleaser self is not a choice you make one day. It is a role handed to you when you are still too small to understand what choice even means. Picture a little girl sitting quietly at the dinner table. Her brother shouts, her sister cries, but she stays silent. Her parents smile at her and say, "You're such a good child, you never cause trouble." She doesn't realize that what they call goodness is really her erasure. Or imagine a little boy who falls on the playground, knees scraped and bleeding, tears sting his eyes, but he sees his father's disapproval. "Be strong," the father says. "Don't cry." And so the boy swallows his pain, believing that love arrives only when his suffering is hidden. Psychologists call this conditional regard. Instead of receiving love simply for existing, you are rewarded for compliance, obedience, or silence. Attachment theory tells us that children adapt to the environment they are given. If warmth comes when you are agreeable, you learn to trade authenticity for approval. If conflict brings punishment, you learn that safety lies in making others comfortable. The nervous system records these lessons like scripture, engraving them into the way you breathe, speak, and relate for the rest of your life. And so the child becomes the mask. They sense the storms in the home before they arrive, adjusting their tone, their words, their very presence to keep the fragile peace intact. They become the helper, the fixer, the one who anticipates the moods of those around them, as though reading weather patterns. This is not kindness in its purest form. It is survival dressed up as virtue. The child's own needs retreat into the shadows, unseen and unmet, while the performance of harmony is applauded. But beneath the applause grows a quiet ache. The girl praised for being no trouble feels invisible in her own family. The boy celebrated for swallowing his tears feels alone in his pain. The lesson is carved deep into their bones. Love is not a right, it is a wage, and the currency you must pay is yourself. This is how the seed of self-erasure is planted. What begins as a child's strategy to secure affection becomes the foundation of the pleaser self. And though the child grows taller, older, outwardly stronger, the echo of that bargain follows into adulthood, shaping how you smile, how you speak, how you disappear. The mask you wear as an adult is stitched from the fabric of your childhood, and it is here that the shadow first begins to take shape, waiting to follow you into every room you enter. What happens to a child who learns that love must be earned? They do not shed that lesson when they grow taller, when they leave the house, when they step into adulthood. Instead, it hardens into something else, a mask, polished and perfected, so convincing that even you begin to believe it is who you are. You become the smiling shadow, the person who is endlessly agreeable, admired for reliability, praised for being the one everyone can count on. At work, you're the one who stays late, who volunteers for the extra project, who apologizes for mistakes that aren't yours. In friendships, you're the one who says yes to plans even when exhaustion pulls at your fans. Body. In love, you anticipate needs before they're spoken, shaping yourself into the partner who never demands too much. From the outside, it looks like generosity. From the inside, it feels like disappearing. There's a woman who spends her evenings listening to friends' problems, always patient, always gentle, but who has no one she feels safe enough to burden with her own struggles. There's a man who apologizes for speaking too loudly in a meeting, for sending an email too late, for existing in a way that might inconvenience someone else. These are not isolated moments. They are symptoms of a deeper fear. The fear that rejection will come the moment you stop performing harmony. Psychologists describe this as the fawn response, a survival strategy where your nervous system chooses compliance over confrontation. The same cortisol that once flooded your childhood body when conflict arose now surges at the thought of disappointing someone you love. Neuroscience shows how the brain's reward centers light up with approval, how the body learns to chase that fleeting sense of safety, even at the cost of your own truth. The mask becomes your oxygen mask, except the air it gives you is laced with resentment. And resentment does grow, silently, like a shadow monster kept in a locked room. You feel it in the tightness of your chest when you say yes to a dinner you dread. You feel it in the silent fury when your boundaries are crossed and you smile anyway. You feel it in the hollow fatigue after a day of performing, when you collapse into bed not knowing what you truly want, only what others expected of you. This is the paradox of the pleaser self. The more you give, the more you vanish. The more you are loved for your mask, the less anyone sees your face. And so you live in the tension between gratitude and emptiness, praised for a role that starves your soul. But masks are not built in isolation. They are sustained by something larger, by society itself, a world that applauds your endless yes. And it is here, in that cultural applause, that the trap deepens. Why does a single word yes feel safer than the truth of what you actually want? The answer lies not only in your past, but in the architecture of your brain itself. Human beings are wired for belonging. From the moment you are born, survival depends on connection. A baby left unattended cannot feed itself, cannot protect itself, cannot live. Evolution carved this dependency into your nervous system, teaching your body that acceptance is life and rejection is death. Attachment theory explains how this ancient survival code unfolds. When caregivers respond with consistency, you develop secure attachment, a sense that the world will hold you even if you stumble. But if love comes only when you perform, if affection is withdrawn when you cry too loud or resist too much, you learn an anxious, preoccupied style of bonding. You become hyper-attuned to others' moods, forever scanning the room like a radar, terrified of abandonment. Your nervous system cannot rest until everyone is pleased. Neuroscience confirms what you feel in your body. Studies show that when you anticipate rejection, your amygdala, the brain's alarm system, lights up as if you are facing physical danger. Cortisol floods your bloodstream, raising your heart rate, tightening your muscles, preparing you to fight for safety. But instead of fighting, your body chooses the fawn response. Fawning is the lesser-known cousin of fight, flight, or freeze. It is submission disguised as kindness, compliance masquerading as harmony. You smile, you agree, you soften your voice, not because you want to, but because your nervous system believes it is the only way to survive. And yet, there is another chemical at play, dopamine. Every time your efforts are met with approval, every time someone praises you for being helpful or dependable, your brain releases this feel-good neurotransmitter. The face meta, praise feels like a hit of oxygen in a suffocating room. But it is fleeting, and so you chase it again and again, saying yes, even when it costs you peace. What once was a survival strategy becomes a neurochemical loop, fear of rejection on one side, the addictive high of approval on the other. Social neuroscience reveals the paradox. The same wiring that allows you to bond, to love, to cooperate, is the wiring that enslaves you when misused. For the pleaser self, belonging becomes a chain, and the quest for safety becomes the very reason you feel unsafe in your own skin. You are not weak for this, you are human, but without awareness, your biology becomes your prison. And so, you keep bending, smiling, yielding, until one day you realize that the mask you wear is not just protecting you, it is consuming you. This is the dark turn, where harmony transforms into harm, and the shadow of endless yes begins to swallow the light of who you are. What begins as kindness eventually curdles into something darker. The pleaser self, born from a desire to keep peace, slowly poisons the very soul it was meant to protect. At first, it looks noble to give without pause, to bend without breaking, to be the one who carries the weight so others don't have to. But the cost is hidden, and it grows silently, like rot beneath polished wood. You say yes because you fear conflict, but every yes you whisper against your own will plants a seed of quiet resentment. That resentment doesn't erupt like a storm, it seeps, drop by drop, into your bloodstream. You feel it in the sharp edge of your sighs, in the way your chest tightens when someone thanks you for something you never wanted to do. You bury it under more smiles, more apologies, more assurances that you are fine. But a buried wound does not heal, it festers. Imagine a garden, green and blooming to every passerby. From a distance, it looks alive, even beautiful. Yet beneath the soil, the roots are brittle, starved of water, gasping for nourishment that never comes. This is the pleaser's life. Outward harmony masking inner depletion. Or picture a candle burning bright, illuminating the darkness for everyone else, but consuming its own body in the process. The more you shine for others, the less of you remains. Psychologists call this emotional burnout. Your nervous system, once calibrated for survival, now runs on overdrive. Cortisol levels remain high, sleep grows restless, the body aches in ways you cannot explain, and emotionally, you drift into the shadow passive aggressiveness, irritability, or numbness that feels like a slow death of the self. You promised the world endless harmony, but in the silence of your own heart, you are screaming. There is also a deeper paradox, a cruel one. In your quest to be loved, you become invisible. By saying yes to everyone else, you are saying the loudest no to yourself. The mask of endless agreement wins applause, but applause is not intimacy. People admire the role you play, not the person you are. And when you finally collapse under the weight of your giving, the very people you carried may not even notice that you have fallen. This is the curse of endless harmony, that it devours the very person it pretends to save. It promises belonging, yet delivers loneliness. It offers peace, yet leaves you at war with yourself. And so the question becomes unavoidable. Why does the world reward this self-erasure? To answer that, we must step into the realm of culture and society and examine how the myth of the good person keeps the pleaser bound in chains. Have you ever noticed how society smiles at your sacrifice but grows uncomfortable at your boundaries? From the very beginning, the rules are whispered into your ears like lullabies. Good girls don't complain. Good boys are helpful. The lessons seep into you before you can resist them. Kindness means silence, love means service, worth means erasure. And as you grow, those lessons are reinforced, not only by family, but by the world itself, applauding every time you place someone else above yourself. Consider the workplace. The one who stays late, who answers emails at midnight, who burns weekends at the altar of productivity, is praised as dedicated, loyal, indispensable. Yet beneath the praise lies a quiet exploitation. Your inability to say no becomes a resource others depend on. Or look at relationships, where romantic myths glorify selfless love. The idea that to be a worthy partner you must give endlessly, even to the point of exhaustion. You learn to equate sacrifice with devotion, obedience with virtue. Even faith and culture often cloak the chains in sacred language. Stories of saints who give without question, mothers who never rest, fathers who never falter. The narrative is clear. The good person is the one who absorbs pain without protest, who bends without breaking, who disappears gracefully into the needs of others. To rebel against this script feels like betrayal not only of family, but of society itself. Psychology calls this social reinforcement. Behaviors rewarded by external approval become etched deeper into your identity. Neuroscience reveals how dopamine cements these patterns, each complement a chemical signal urging you to repeat the performance. Over time, you begin to confuse applause for love, admiration for intimacy, usefulness for worth. You are not only wearing a mask, you are being crowned for it. And with every crown comes a heavier chain. Yet this myth of the good person carries a shadow. By equating virtue with selflessness, society erases the self. What is called kindness often disguises compliance. What is called strength often hides silence. And so the pleaser, who once only wanted love, becomes the cultural scapegoat carrying the burdens no one else wants to hold, praised for suffering quietly while the world feeds on their willingness. This is the cruelty of social parts. Applause. It rewards the very act that hollows you out. It convinces you that disappearing is noble, that exhaustion is admirable, that breaking yourself for others is the highest form of love. But when the clapping fades, you are left alone with the truth that a life lived only in service of others can leave you nameless to yourself. And so, beneath the glittering myth of goodness, a deeper wound festers, because society's praise may fill your ears, but it cannot fill the silence in your chest. That silence grows heavier, until one day it demands to be heard in the form of loneliness, anxiety, or despair. It is here, in the shadow of applause, that the emotional consequences begin to bloom. What happens when you spend a lifetime bending? At first it looks harmless, a smile here, a nod there, another yes when your soul longed for no. But over the years, something begins to hollow out inside you. The mask you wear becomes heavier. The shadow you suppress grows darker, until one day you realize that you cannot remember who you are without them. Picture this. Someone asks you what you truly want. Not what your family expects, not what your boss needs, not what your partner desires, but you. The question hangs in the air like a blade, and you freeze. Your lips move, but no words come, because you have lived so long in service of others' desires that your own have grown silent, buried under layers of compliance. It is not that you don't have a self, it is that the self has been smothered into invisibility. Psychologists call this identity diffusion, a kind of inner fog that forms when your life is organized around others' expectations rather than your own. Neuroscience shows how chronic self-suppression triggers stress responses in the body, keeping cortisol levels elevated, draining your energy until even rest feels heavy. And emotionally, the toll is devastating. Anxiety gnaws at your nights, depression shadows your days, and exhaustion becomes your constant companion. Relationships, too, suffer under the weight of your silence. You are surrounded by people, yet you feel unseen. Your smile assures them everything is fine, while inside, you ache with the loneliness of being misunderstood. The mirror reflects only the faces you've pleased, never your own. And the cruel paradox emerges. You give everything to be loved, yet feel unloved in the deepest sense, because no one has been allowed to love the real you. The pleaser's life is a slow erosion. Like a garden forced to bloom for others, you grow beautiful flowers, but your roots are parched, your soil depleted. Like a candle, you glow brightly, admired by all, but each flicker consumes your own body until only wax and smoke remain. The applause may echo around you, but in the quiet of your room, you feel the aching silence of a soul that has been waiting too long to be acknowledged. And this loneliness is not gentle. It is a hunger that never ends, a haunting emptiness that grows heavier the more you try to outrun it. You smile, you serve, you bend, and yet the more you do, the more you vanish. Until one day, the truth rises like a shadow you can no longer ignore. By living for everyone else, you have abandoned yourself. But even in this emptiness lies the seed of possibility. For if the mask has brought you here, perhaps the first crack in it could lead to something else, not destruction, but liberation. And that journey begins with the courage to say a sacred word the pleaser fears most: no. What if the word you feared most, no, could be the very key that sets you free? For so long, you have treated no as dangerous, selfish, even cruel. You have bent yourself into harmony, swallowed your truth, and worn your mask because you believed that to refuse was to lose love. But what if no is not rejection, but resurrection? What if it is not the end of belonging, but the beginning of your own life? Picture yourself at the edge of a decade, familiar moment. A friend asks for a favor when your body is heavy with exhaustion. The old reflex rises, the automatic yes, the smile rehearsed 1,000 times. But this time, you pause. You place your hand on that rising panic in your chest, breathe deeply, and whisper the word you never thought you could: no. At first, it trembles out of you, fragile as glass. But with each use, it grows stronger. Because the sacred no is not a wall, it is a doorway back to yourself. Psychologists describe boundary setting as an essential act of self-respect. It is not the rejection of others, but the affirmation of your own worth. Neuroscience shows how even small acts of refusal can begin to regulate the nervous system, calming the hypervigilance of the fawn response. Each time you honor your own limits, your body learns safety again. You are teaching your nervous system that you can survive displeasing others, and in doing so, you discover a new kind of freedom. Imagine your inner life as a garden long neglected. For years, you poured water into everyone else's soil, watching their flowers bloom while yours withered. Saying no is the first drop of rain that falls on your own roots. At first, the earth resists, dry and cracked. But slowly, life stirs. A single green shoot breaks the surface, fragile yet unstoppable. This is what happens when you reclaim your desires, when you plant your own dreams instead of living in the shadows of others. And it does not stop with boundaries. The sacred no opens space for a sacred yes. Yes to rest, to authenticity, to relationships built on truth instead of performance. Therapy, mindfulness, and self-reflection help you untangle the fawn response. But the essence of healing remains simple: choosing yourself without apology. Each no you speak is not an act of selfishness, but of courage, a declaration that you are no longer willing to vanish to make others comfortable. And so, the pleaser self begins to crumble, not in shame, but in liberation. You stand taller, breathe deeper, and for the first time in years, feel the weight lift from your chest. Because the greatest act of love you can offer the world is not your endless yes, it is the truth of your own presence. And that truth, once spoken, prepares the way for a final revelation: that the freedom to be seen is not given by others, but claimed by you. Have you noticed how the more you try to be loved by everyone, the less you feel truly loved by anyone? This is the paradox of the pleaser self. You spend years polishing the mask, softening your voice, shaping your body and spirit into something acceptable, something easy, something convenient. And yet, beneath the applause, there is a hollow silence, because people cannot embrace what they cannot see, and you have hidden yourself so well that even you have forgotten where you end and the mask begins. Nietzsche once wrote that to become who you are is the greatest task, not who others believe you should be, not the shadow cast by their expectations, but the raw, unfiltered self that exists beyond performance. The pleaser lives in opposition to this truth, always bending, always curving, until their own outline disappears. But what if the courage to be authentic, to let your no be as sacred as your yes, is the only path toward real love? Think of Jung's vision of the shadow, the parts of you buried in darkness, waiting for acknowledgement. For the pleaser, the shadow is not only anger or fear, it is also desire, longing, individuality. To reclaim the shadow is to call those exiled parts back into the light, to risk the discomfort of being seen in full, not just the smile, but the sorrow, not just the compliance, but the rebellion. And though it feels terrifying, it is only in that exposure that intimacy can begin. Rilke wrote that love is not about merging, but about standing guard over each other's solitude. To be truly loved is not to dissolve into endless yes, but to be recognized in your wholeness, boundaries, and all. You do not need to vanish to be worthy. You do not need to bend until you break. The people who can only love your mask were never meant to hold your soul. So you stand at a threshold, remain the smiling shadow, endlessly agreeable, yet endlessly unseen, or dare to step into the light of your own truth, to say no when your body trembles, to reveal your needs when silence feels safer, to choose presence over performance. It is a terrifying freedom, but it is freedom nonetheless. And so the final truth emerges, clear and undeniable. The world does not need your endless yes. It needs the truth of who you are. And when you finally offer that truth, raw and unpolished, you will discover the love you were seeking all along. Not love for the mask, but love for the face behind it. And in that moment, for the first time, you will no longer feel invisible.